The blistering sun beat down on the wooden platform where Maribel Gordon stood with her hands bound, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. It was 1878 in Miles City, Montana Territory, and the auctioneer's voice boomed across the dusty town square as if he were selling cattle instead of a human being. Maribel's emerald eyes scanned the crowd, searching for a friendly face among the sea of strangers who had come to bid on her freedom, but found none. Her family's debts had brought her to this moment of utter humiliation, a 20-year-old woman being sold to the highest bidder. $500 for this fine young woman. Good with a needle, can cook, clean, and read. Who'll give me $500? The auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the square where curious onlookers gathered. Maribel fought back tears as she remembered her father's pale face when he'd fallen ill last winter. The doctor bills had mounted, the mortgage on their small ranch had gone unpaid, and then her father had died anyway. Her mother, overcome with grief, had followed him to the grave just 2 months later. With no one left to protect her, the bank had swooped in like vultures, claiming everything the Gordon family had ever owned, including, apparently, their only daughter. $550. Called a portly saloon owner whose reputation for mistreating his serving girls was well known throughout the county. $600, countered an elderly rancher who eyed Maribel like she was a prized mare. Maribel lowered her gaze to her worn boots, unable to bear the scrutiny of the crowd any longer. The spring breeze carried the scent of dust and pine from the nearby mountains, and she wondered if she would ever again walk freely among those hills. $700. Called a new voice, deep and steady. The crowd parted as a tall figure moved toward the auction platform. Maribel looked up to see a broad-shouldered man in a worn leather vest and dusty cowboy hat. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat brim, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in a few days' worth of stubble. $800. The saloon owner countered angrily. $1,000, the cowboy said calmly, and a murmur rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer's eyes widened at the substantial offer. $1,000 from Mr. Cole Armstrong. Do I hear any other bids? The saloon owner scowled but shook his head. The elderly rancher muttered something under his breath and stepped back. Sold. To Mr. Armstrong for $1,000. Maribel's stomach twisted with dread as the cowboy approached the platform. Would this stranger be any kinder than the others who had bid on her? Or had she merely exchanged one form of bondage for another? Cole Armstrong climbed the steps to the platform and handed a stack of bills to the auctioneer. Then he turned to Maribel, and for the first time, she got a clear look at his face. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with intense blue eyes that studied her with an unreadable expression. "Miss Gordon," he said quietly as he pulled a knife from his belt. Maribel flinched, but instead of threatening her, he reached for her bound wrists and carefully cut the ropes. "You're free to go," he said, returning the knife to its sheath. Maribel stared at him in disbelief. "What?" "I said you're free," he repeated. "No one should be sold like a piece of property. The debt's been paid." But you spent $1,000, she stammered. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Consider it an investment in humanity." He turned to leave. "Wait," Maribel called after him. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Cole paused, looking back at her with those penetrating blue eyes. "Because 5 years ago, I was standing where you are now. Someone did the same for me. I swore I'd pass along the kindness if I ever got the chance." Before Maribel could respond, a commotion broke out at the edge of the square. The sheriff was arguing with several men, including the banker who had arranged the auction. "You can't just set her free, Armstrong," the banker shouted. "The debt must be settled." "It has been," Cole responded calmly. "I've paid the money." "But the contract specifies—" "I don't give a damn what your contract specifies," Cole interrupted, his voice hardening. "I've purchased Miss Gordon's debt, and what I do with that purchase is my business." The sheriff, a weathered man with a graying mustache, stepped between Cole and the banker. "He's right, Wilkins. The money's been paid. What Armstrong does next isn't your concern." The banker's face reddened with anger, but he backed down under the sheriff's stern gaze. Cole turned back to Maribel. "Do you have somewhere to go?" The reality of her situation suddenly hit her. Her family's ranch was gone, her parents were dead, and she had no money, no possessions beyond the simple dress she wore. "No," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole studied her for a long moment. "I could use some help at my ranch," he said finally. "Cooking, cleaning." "Nothing more than that," he added hastily. "It's honest work with fair pay. You'd have your own quarters. When you've saved enough to move on, you're welcome to go." Maribel hesitated. She knew nothing about this man beyond his unexpected act of kindness. But what choice did she have? "I accept your offer, Mr. Armstrong," she said with as much dignity as she could muster. "And I promise I'll work hard to repay your generosity." "It's just Cole," he said, "and there's nothing to repay." He gestured toward a bay horse tethered to a hitching post. "My ranch is about 10 miles north of town. We should get going before nightfall." As they walked toward his horse, Maribel felt the stares of the townspeople following them. Her cheeks burned with humiliation at having been auctioned like livestock, but underneath that shame was a small, flickering flame of hope. Whatever waited for her at Cole Armstrong's ranch, it had to be better than the fate she had narrowly escaped. Cole untied his horse and in one fluid motion swung himself into the saddle. He reached down a calloused hand to Maribel. After a moment's hesitation, she grasped it, surprised by the strength with which he pulled her up behind him. "Hold on," he instructed, and Maribel tentatively placed her hands on his waist. As the horse trotted out of Miles City, Maribel couldn't help looking back at the town that had witnessed her lowest moment. The buildings grew smaller in the distance, and with each hoofbeat, she felt as if she were leaving a part of her old life behind. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. The road to Cole's ranch wound through rolling plains and stands of pine trees. Neither of them spoke much during the journey. Cole seemed lost in his own thoughts, and Maribel was too overwhelmed by the day's events to make conversation. As the sun began to set, painting the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they crested a hill, and Cole's ranch came into view. It was larger than Maribel had expected, a main house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, corrals for horses, and several smaller outbuildings. A creek ran through the property, and grazing cattle dotted the distant pastures. It wasn't grand by any means, but it was well maintained and spoke of hard work and modest prosperity. "This is yours?" Maribel asked, unable to hide her surprise. Cole nodded. 5 years of back-breaking work. Started with 20 acres and 10 cattle. Now it's 500 acres and over 200 head. As they approached the main house, a dog came bounding out to greet them, a black and white border collie that barked excitedly at their arrival. "That's Pepper," Cole said as he dismounted and then helped Maribel down. "She's friendly, just noisy." Maribel bent to pet the dog, grateful for the warm welcome. "Hello, Pepper," she said softly, and the dog licked her hand enthusiastically. "Miss Gordon," called a female voice, and Maribel looked up to see an older woman with gray-streaked dark hair emerge from the house. "I'm Mrs. Abernathy. Mr. Armstrong sent word you'd be joining us." Maribel glanced at Cole in confusion. "I sent my ranch hand ahead while you were being processed for the auction," he explained. I knew you'd need some things prepared regardless of how it turned out. Mrs. Abernathy approached with a kind smile. I've got a hot meal ready and prepared the room at the back of the house for you. Come inside, dear. You look like you could use some rest. Maribel followed the woman inside, acutely aware of how dirty and disheveled she must appear after her ordeal. The interior of the house was simple but comfortable: polished wood floors, sturdy furniture, a large stone fireplace. It smelled of pine and freshly baked bread. The bathroom is through there, Mrs. Abernathy said, pointing to a door off the kitchen. I've drawn you a bath and laid out some clean clothes. They may be a bit large, but they'll do until we can get you something proper. Thank you, Maribel said, emotion threatening to overwhelm her at this unexpected kindness. That's very thoughtful. It's nothing, dear. Now you get cleaned up while I finish supper. The bath was heaven, the first real luxury Maribel had experienced in months. As she sank into the warm water, she finally allowed herself to cry, releasing all the fear, grief, and humiliation of the past months. By the time she emerged, dressed in the borrowed clothes, she felt somewhat renewed, though still uncertain about what her future held. In the kitchen, she found Cole and Mrs. Abernathy seated at a large wooden table laden with a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh vegetables. Cole stood when she entered, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please join us," he said. "Throughout the meal, Mrs. Abernathy kept up a steady stream of conversation, filling the silences that might otherwise have been awkward. Maribel learned that the older woman was a widow who lived in a small cabin on the property and helped with the cooking and housekeeping. There were also 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse: Tom, who was middle-aged and had been with Cole since the beginning, and Jackson, a younger man who had joined them last year. "Tomorrow I can show you around the property," Cole said as they finished eating. "Help you get your bearings." "I'd like that," Maribel replied, "and I'd like to start earning my keep as soon as possible." Cole studied her for a moment. "There's no rush. Take some time to rest and recover." "I've been resting for too long," Maribel said firmly. "I need to work to be useful again." Something like respect flickered in Cole's eyes. "All right, then. We'll start tomorrow." After helping Mrs. Abernathy clear the table, Maribel retired to her room, a small but comfortable space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that overlooked the creek. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the clean, soft quilt, and tried to make sense of the dramatic change in her circumstances. This morning, she had awakened in a jail cell, awaiting auction like a piece of property. Tonight, she was in a comfortable bed in the home of a man who had spent a small fortune to set her free, asking nothing in return but honest work. It seemed too good to be true, and Maribel couldn't help wondering if there was some catch she hadn't yet discovered. But as exhaustion overtook her and she drifted toward sleep, one thought provided comfort. Whatever tomorrow might bring, it had to be better than what she had left behind. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the warm glow of sunrise through her window. For a disorienting moment, Maribel didn't know where she was. Then memory flooded back: the auction, Cole's unexpected intervention, the journey to his ranch. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes, a simple skirt and blouse that hung loosely on her frame, and made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Abernathy was already there, kneading dough for bread. "Good morning, Miss Gordon. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Maribel admitted. "And please call me Maribel." "Only if you'll call me Helen," the older woman replied with a warm smile. "Mr. Armstrong and the men have been up since dawn. They're out checking the herd, but he said he'd be back mid-morning to show you around." Maribel rolled up her sleeves. "What can I do to help in the meantime?" Helen assigned her to preparing breakfast for the returning men, frying bacon, scrambling eggs and slicing fresh bread. It felt good to be useful, to move around a kitchen with purpose again. By the time Cole and his ranch hands returned, Maribel had set the table and had a hearty meal waiting. The men stomped the dust from their boots before entering. Cole nodded a greeting to Maribel as he hung his hat on a peg by the door. Tom was a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard, while Jackson was lanky with sandy hair and a friendly grin. Both men treated Maribel with polite respect, showing none of the curiosity or judgment she had feared. After breakfast, Cole took Maribel on a tour of the ranch. They walked the property as he pointed out the various buildings and explained the operation. The Armstrong Ranch, as it was called, primarily raised cattle but also had a vegetable garden, an orchard of apple and pear trees, and a small flock of chickens. "It's a beautiful place," Maribel said as they paused by the creek. "You've accomplished a lot in 5 years." Cole skipped a stone across the water. "It wasn't easy, still isn't, but it's mine. No one can take it away." "You mentioned yesterday that you were once in my position," Maribel said cautiously. Were you auctioned as well?" Cole was quiet for so long that Maribel thought he might not answer. "I was," he finally said. "My father was a gambler, bad one, racked up debts he couldn't pay, then drank himself to death. The creditors came for me instead." "That's terrible," Maribel whispered. Cole shrugged, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed how difficult the memory still was. "A cattle baron named Hollister bought my contract, but instead of putting me to work, he tore it up, said no man should own another. Gave me a job on his ranch instead, taught me the business. When he died, he left me enough money to start my own place." "That explains why you did what you did for me." "Partly," Cole said, "but I also couldn't stand by and watch what was happening. It wasn't right." They continued walking, and Cole showed her the blacksmith shop where he shoed the horses and repaired tools, the smokehouse where they cured meat for the winter, and the root cellar stocked with preserves. "This will be your domain," he said as they returned to the house, gesturing to the kitchen and adjacent rooms. "Mrs. Abernathy Helen will show you the ropes. She doesn't stay overnight except in the worst weather, so most evenings it'll be just you cooking for me and occasionally the hands if they don't eat in the bunkhouse." "I understand," Maribel said. "I'm a good cook and I learn quickly." "I don't doubt it," Cole replied, and there was that hint of a smile again. "Now I've got work to do. We can talk more at supper." As the days turned into weeks, Maribel settled into life at the Armstrong Ranch. Her days fell into a comfortable rhythm, rising early to prepare breakfast, tending the garden, helping Helen with the laundry and cleaning, and preparing meals for Cole and the ranch hands. In the evenings, after the work was done, she often sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky while Pepper lay at her feet. Cole was often busy from dawn until dusk, managing the cattle, fixing fences, and handling the 1,000 tasks that came with running a successful ranch. But he always made time to ask about her day, to thank her for the meals she prepared, and occasionally to share stories over coffee after supper. He was never inappropriate, never made her feel like anything less than a respected member of his household, and Maribel found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength and integrity. One afternoon in late summer, as Maribel was hanging laundry on the line, she saw Cole riding hard toward the house, his expression grim. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped and strode toward her. "Maribel," he said, "I need to ride into town. We're missing some cattle and I think they might have been rustled. I'll be gone overnight." "Of course," she replied. "I'll pack some food for your journey." As she prepared a bundle of bread, cheese, and dried beef, Maribel couldn't help noticing the gun belt Cole had strapped on something he rarely wore around the ranch. "Be careful," she said as she handed him the provisions. "Cattle rustlers can be dangerous." "I've dealt with worse," he assured her, but there was a hardness in his eyes that Maribel hadn't seen before. "Lock the doors tonight. Tom and Jackson will be nearby if you need anything." After Cole left, an uneasy feeling settled over Maribel. She went about her chores, but found herself constantly glancing toward the road, waiting for his return. That night, she slept poorly, troubled by dreams of Cole facing unseen dangers. The next day passed with no word from him. By evening, Maribel was pacing the porch, watching the road with increasing anxiety. Finally, just as darkness was falling, she spotted a rider approaching. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by alarm when she realized the horse was moving too slowly and the rider was slumped in the saddle. "Tom! Jackson!" she called, running toward the bunkhouse. The two men emerged quickly, and all three hurried down the road to meet Cole. As they drew closer, Maribel gasped. Cole's shirt was stained with blood and a crude bandage was wrapped around his left arm. His face was pale beneath his tan, his jaw clenched in pain. "What happened?" Tom asked as he helped Cole dismount. "Ran into the rustlers," Cole said through gritted teeth. "3 of them, got my cattle back, but one of them got a lucky shot." "Let's get you inside," Maribel said, taking his right arm to support him. "Jackson, ride for the doctor." "No doctor," Cole protested. "It's just a flesh wound." "Bullet went clean through." "At least let me look at it," Maribel insisted. "My father taught me some basic medical care." Cole acquiesced, allowing Tom and Maribel to help him into the house and onto a chair in the kitchen. Maribel sent Tom to fetch hot water and her sewing kit, then carefully removed Cole's bloodied shirt. The wound was on his upper arm, a ragged hole where the bullet had entered, and a larger exit wound on the other side. It was still bleeding slowly, but as Cole had said, it appeared to have missed anything vital. "You're lucky," Maribel said as she cleaned the wound with warm water. "A few inches to the right and it would have hit your chest." Cole watched her work, his blue eyes intent on her face. "I didn't feel particularly lucky at the time, did you? Did you have to kill anyone?" she asked quietly as she prepared a needle and thread. "No. Wounded one, the others ran. Sheriff's got them in custody now." Cole winced as Maribel began stitching the wound. "They were hired by Wilkins the banker from town." Maribel's hand stilled. "The same one who arranged my auction," Cole nodded grimly. "He's been trying to force smaller ranchers out of business, wants to sell the land to the railroad. He's not happy I've been helping some of them stay afloat." "Including me," Maribel said softly. "You were just the latest in a long line of people he's tried to ruin." Cole's jaw tightened. "But he's done now. The sheriff found documents in his office linking him to 3 different rustling operations. He'll be going away for a long time." Maribel resumed her stitching, trying to make the sutures as neat and small as possible. "So it's over, this part is. There will always be men like Wilkins, men who see people as things to be used and discarded." Maribel tied off the last stitch and began wrapping clean bandages around Cole's arm. "And there will always be men like you," she said, meeting his eyes, "who stand against them." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a softening around his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "I'm no hero, Maribel. I've just been on the wrong side of men like that and know how it feels." "You're a hero to me," she said simply, securing the bandage. "You saved me when no one else would." For a moment they remained there, her hand still on his arm, their faces close, something unspoken passing between them. Then Cole cleared his throat and looked away. "Thank you for patching me up," he said, rising from the chair. "I should get some rest." Maribel nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment had been. "Of course. I'll check on you in the morning." After Cole had gone to his room, Maribel sat alone in the kitchen, her hands still stained with his blood, her heart racing with emotions she couldn't quite name. Or perhaps wouldn't name, for fear of where they might lead. The following days were quiet as Cole recovered from his wound. Maribel took on extra duties, bringing meals to his room and changing his bandages daily. At first, he protested the special treatment, insisting he could manage on his own, but eventually he surrendered to her care with gruff gratitude. During these brief, private moments, something between them began to change. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Cole asked about her life before her parents died, and Maribel found herself sharing memories she had locked away in grief: her mother's talent for music, her father's passion for books, the small but happy home they had made together. In turn, Cole spoke more of his own past: his childhood on a small farm in Kansas, his mother's death when he was 12, his father's decline into gambling and drinking. He told her about the years he spent working for Hollister, learning every aspect of cattle ranching, and his determination to build something that was truly his own. "It must have been hard, starting from nothing," Maribel said one evening as she checked his healing wound. Cole's eyes followed her movements. "It was, but having nothing means you have nothing to lose, makes a man willing to take risks. Like spending $1,000 to free a stranger?" she asked with a small smile. "That wasn't a risk," Cole replied seriously. "That was the easiest decision I've ever made." Maribel's hand stilled on his arm, and she looked up to find his eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, she thought he might say more, might bridge the growing current between them. Instead, he gently pulled his arm away. "The wound is healing well," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I should be able to get back to full work soon." Maribel nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of disappointment in her chest. "Just don't overdo it. Tearing those stitches would set you back weeks." By early autumn, Cole was fully recovered and the ranch was bustling with activity in preparation for winter. Maribel worked alongside Helen to preserve the harvest from the garden, putting up jars of vegetables, fruits, and jams that would sustain them through the cold months ahead. The men brought in the hay, repaired buildings, and prepared the cattle for the coming winter. One crisp October morning, Cole found Maribel in the orchard, picking the last of the apples. She stood on a ladder, reaching for a particularly beautiful specimen high in the tree, when she felt the ladder shift beneath her. Before she could cry out, strong hands grasped her waist, steadying her. "Careful," Cole said, looking up at her. "That ladder's not as stable as it looks." "I had it under control," Maribel replied, though she made no move to remove his hands from her waist. "I can see that," he said, a rare full smile spreading across his face. "But I'd hate to see you fall and break that stubborn neck of yours." "Stubborn?" Maribel feigned offense as she descended the ladder, ending up standing very close to Cole, his hands still at her waist. "I prefer to think of it as determined." "Determined, then," he conceded, but he didn't step back. Instead, his gaze traveled over her face as if memorizing its features. "Determined and brave and far too good for a place like this." Maribel shook her head. "This is the first place since my parents died that's felt like home." Something flashed in Cole's eyes, hope, perhaps, or longing. "Maribel, Mr. Armstrong." Jackson's voice cut through the moment as the young ranch hand came running toward them. "Riders coming. Looks like trouble." Cole released Maribel immediately, his expression hardening as he turned toward the approaching riders. "Get inside the house," he told her. "Stay there until I come for you." "But please," he said, and the urgency in his voice silenced her protest. Maribel hurried to the house, but couldn't resist watching from the window as 3 riders approached the ranch. Even from a distance, she could tell they were rough men, unshaven, dirty, with hard eyes and harder expressions. Cole met them in the yard, his stance casual but alert, one hand resting near the gun at his hip. The conversation appeared tense. Though Maribel couldn't hear the words, she could see Cole shaking his head firmly as the lead rider became increasingly agitated. Finally, the man spat on the ground, said something that made Cole's shoulders stiffen, and then all 3 riders turned and galloped away. Cole watched them go, then strode quickly toward the house. Maribel met him at the door. "Who were they?" she asked. "Men working for a cattle baron named Fletcher," Cole replied, his jaw tight. "He's buying up all the land he can get his hands on, and he's not particular about how he gets it. Made me an offer for the ranch." "You turned him down," Maribel guessed. "Of course I did. This land isn't for sale." Cole ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "But Fletcher doesn't take no for an answer. Those men will be back." "What will you do?" Maribel asked, unable to keep the worry from her voice. Cole's gaze softened as he looked at her. "Nothing's going to happen to this ranch or to anyone on it. I promise you that." The next few days passed in a state of heightened alertness. Cole posted Tom and Jackson as lookouts, and he himself seemed to sleep little, often checking the property at odd hours. Maribel caught him cleaning his rifle one evening, his movements methodical, his expression distant. "You're expecting trouble," she said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table. Cole didn't look up from his task. "I'm preparing for it. There's a difference." "Let me help," Maribel said. "I can shoot. My father taught me." Now Cole did look at her, surprise evident in his face. "That's not your responsibility." "This is my home too," she insisted. "Or at least, it has been for the past few months. I won't hide inside while you face danger alone." Cole set the rifle down, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "You've changed since you first arrived here." "I've remembered who I am," Maribel corrected him. "Before my parents died, before the auction, I wasn't always afraid, Cole. I was strong, independent." "You still are," he said softly. "Stronger than you know." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Maribel felt that familiar current between them, stronger now than ever before. But once again, Cole broke the connection first, returning his attention to the rifle. "I'll show you how to use this tomorrow," he said. "Just in case, but I hope to God you never need to." The expected confrontation came 3 days later, not with violence but with legalities. The sheriff rode out from Miles City with a document in hand, a claim that Cole's land belonged to Fletcher by right of an old mining claim. "It's nonsense," Cole said after reading the paper. "This land was never part of any mining operation. The previous owner ran cattle on it for 30 years before he sold it to me." "I know that," the sheriff said wearily. "But Fletcher's got friends in high places, including the territorial judge. There's going to be a hearing next week in Miles City. You'll need to be there with any documentation you have proving your ownership." After the sheriff left, Cole retreated to his study, where he kept all his important papers. Maribel brought him coffee and found him surrounded by deeds, bills of sale, and correspondence related to the ranch. "It's all here," he said, holding up the deed to the property. "Clear title, legally purchased, all taxes paid. Fletcher doesn't have a case." "Then why do you look so worried?" Maribel asked. Cole leaned back in his chair, weariness evident in his face. "Because men like Fletcher don't play by the rules. If he can't take the land legally, he'll try other means." "We won't let him," Maribel said firmly. Cole looked at her for a long moment, then reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had deliberately touched her beyond what was necessary, and the warmth of his calloused fingers around hers sent a shiver through her body. "Maribel," he said, his voice low and earnest. "If things go badly at the hearing, I want you to know that I've made arrangements. There's money in a bank account in Helena enough for you to go anywhere you want, start a new life." "I don't want a new life," Maribel said, tightening her grip on his hand. "I want this one, here, with—" She stopped herself before saying more, suddenly uncertain. "With what?" Cole prompted, his eyes intent on her face. Maribel took a deep breath. "With you," she said simply, "if you want me to stay." For a moment, Cole seemed frozen, his eyes wide with surprise. Then slowly he stood and came around the desk, still holding her hand. "I've wanted you to stay from the first day," he admitted. "But I didn't want you to feel obligated because of what happened in Miles City. I wanted you to be truly free to choose." "I am free," Maribel said, taking a step closer to him. "And I choose this. I choose you." Cole's free hand came up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. "Maribel," he said, her name almost a whisper on his lips. Then he was bending down, and she was rising to meet him, and his mouth found hers in a kiss that started soft, but quickly deepened with months of unspoken longing. Maribel's arms wound around his neck as Cole pulled her closer, his strong arms encircling her waist. The world seemed to narrow to just this moment, just this man whose kindness had saved her, whose strength had protected her, and whose heart, she now knew with certainty, belonged to her as completely as hers did to him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for a very long time," he confessed. Maribel smiled, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "What took you so long, Cowboy?" Cole laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet room. "Fear, I suppose. Fear that you might still see me as the man who bought you at that auction." "I see you as the man who set me free," Maribel corrected him, "and then gave me a reason to use that freedom to stay." Cole kissed her again, briefly but with unmistakable promise. "Whatever happens with Fletcher, with the ranch, we'll face it together. You and me." "Together," Maribel agreed and sealed the promise with another kiss. The day of the hearing in Miles City dawned clear and cold. Cole and Maribel rode into town together, accompanied by Tom and Jackson as witnesses to Cole's continuous operation of the ranch. The town looked different to Maribel, now no longer a place of humiliation and fear, but simply another Montana settlement, unremarkable except for the memories it held. The hearing was held in the town hall, with the territorial judge presiding. Fletcher was there with his lawyers, a corpulent man in an expensive suit, with cold eyes and a perpetual sneer. He barely glanced at Cole and Maribel as they entered. The proceedings were straightforward. Fletcher's lawyer presented the supposed mining claim, arguing that it predated any cattle operation on the land. Cole's lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Mrs. Perkins, who had been recommended by the cattle baron Hollister before his death, systematically dismantled the claim, producing geological surveys that showed no mining activity had ever occurred on Cole's property. When it was Cole's turn to speak, he did so with quiet dignity, laying out the history of his purchase of the land, his development of the ranch, and his compliance with all territorial laws regarding property ownership. "This land isn't just a piece of property to me," he concluded, looking directly at the judge. "It's my life's work, my legacy, and a home for those who depend on me." As he returned to his seat, Cole's hand found Maribel's and squeezed it gently. She returned the pressure, her heart swelling with pride and love for this honorable man who had given her so much more than just her freedom. The judge took less than an hour to make his decision. Fletcher's claim was dismissed as fraudulent, and furthermore, the judge ordered an investigation into Fletcher's other land dealings, citing a pattern of suspicious claims. Fletcher stormed out of the town hall, his face purple with rage. As Cole and Maribel prepared to leave, the sheriff approached them. "Thought you should know," he said quietly. "Those 3 men who came to your ranch, they've been arrested for burning down the Jensen place over in Paradise Valley. Fletcher paid them to do it when Jensen wouldn't sell." "Is the family all right?" Maribel asked anxiously. The sheriff nodded. "Got out safely, but they lost everything else. Fletcher won't be hiring any more thugs, though. He's being investigated for that, too." "Justice catches up eventually," Cole said, his arm slipping around Maribel's waist. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the gesture and a smile tugged at his mustache. "Seems like things have worked out well for both of you," he observed. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. Seen it coming since that auction day." Maribel felt her cheeks warm. "We're very happy," she acknowledged. "Good. This territory could use more happy endings." The sheriff tipped his hat and moved on, leaving Cole and Maribel to make their way out of the town hall. In the bright autumn sunlight, Cole turned to Maribel. "There's something I want to do before we leave town," he said. "Will you come with me?" Maribel nodded, curious, and followed as Cole led her down the main street to a small jewelry store. Inside, the shopkeeper greeted Cole by name. "You're back," the man said with a knowing smile. "And this must be Miss Gordon." "It is," Cole confirmed, then turned to Maribel. "I came here 2 days ago, but nothing seemed right. I thought maybe if you were here to choose." Understanding dawned, and Maribel's heart began to race as the shopkeeper brought out a tray of rings. "Cole," she whispered, "are you asking me?" "Not yet," he interrupted with a smile. "First you need to choose a ring, then I'll do the asking properly." With trembling fingers, Maribel examined the selection. Most were too elaborate for her taste, but one caught her eye, a simple gold band with a small but perfect diamond that caught the light like a star. "This one," she said, holding it up. Cole nodded, his eyes warm with approval. "It suits you." After paying the shopkeeper, Cole led Maribel outside to where their horses were tethered. But instead of mounting up, he took both her hands in his. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "But now that the moment's here, I can't remember a word of it. So I'll just say this. Maribel Gordon, I love you. I think I've loved you since that day at the auction when you stood there with your head held high despite everything. You're the strongest, most compassionate person I've ever known, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Maribel's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she managed to say. "Yes, Cole Armstrong, I will marry you." Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms and kissed her, right there on the main street of Miles City, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. When they parted, both were laughing and crying at once, overwhelmed by joy. "Let's go home," Cole said, helping Maribel onto her horse. As they rode out of town, Maribel glanced back one last time at the place where her life had changed so dramatically. The auction platform where she had stood in bondage was gone now, dismantled after the new territorial governor had outlawed the practice of debt servitude. In its place was an empty space, ready for something new to be built. It seemed fitting, somehow a physical representation of how life could be rebuilt after loss, how spaces once filled with pain could be reclaimed for joy. Maribel turned her face forward, toward the ranch that had become her home, and the man who had become her heart, and smiled at the future stretching before them. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Helen Abernathy decorated the house with autumn flowers and baked a 3-tiered cake, adorned with fresh berries. Tom stood as Cole's best man, while a young woman from a neighboring ranch a friend Maribel had made during her months at Armstrong Ranch served as her maid of honor. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Cole, handsome in a new suit, watched with unconcealed adoration as Maribel walked toward him in a gown of ivory silk that Helen had helped her make. They spoke their vows in clear, steady voices, promises of love and fidelity that both knew would be kept with the same integrity with which they had lived their lives thus far. After the celebration, when the guests had departed and the newlyweds were alone at last, Cole led Maribel to the master bedroom, now their shared room. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the space where the most intimate part of their new life together would unfold. "Mrs. Armstrong," Cole said, the name a caress on his lips as he drew her into his arms. "I like the sound of that," Maribel replied, winding her arms around his neck. "So do I." Cole's eyes darkened as they traveled over her face, her neck, lower. "I still can't believe you're mine." "I've been yours since the day you cut those ropes from my wrists," Maribel said softly. "It just took us both a while to realize it." Cole's response was to kiss her, deeply and thoroughly, as his hands began to explore the curves of her body through the silk of her wedding gown. Maribel responded eagerly, her own hands working at the buttons of his shirt, desire overcoming any shyness she might have felt. They undressed each other slowly, each new revelation of skin met with touches and kisses that built a fire between them. When they came together at last on the wide bed, it was with a passion born of long restraint and deep love, tender yet urgent, gentle yet fierce. Later, lying in Cole's arms as the fire burned low, Maribel traced lazy patterns on his chest, marveling at the turn her life had taken. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "About fate," Maribel replied. "If my parents hadn't died, if I hadn't been auctioned, if you hadn't been there that day, we might never have met." Cole's arms tightened around her. "I don't believe that. I think some souls are meant to find each other, no matter what path they take." Maribel smiled against his skin. "I never took you for a romantic, Mr. Armstrong." "You bring it out in me, Mrs. Armstrong," he replied, rolling her beneath him for another kiss. Winter came to Montana with its usual fury, howling winds, deep snow, and temperatures that froze the creek solid. But inside the Armstrong ranch house, all was warm and bright. Cole and Maribel settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both, as if they had always been meant to share this life, this love, this home. During the long winter evenings, they sat before the fire reading aloud from Cole's collection of books, playing chess, at which Maribel proved surprisingly adept, or simply talking about their dreams for the future. They made plans to expand the ranch, to build a proper garden for Maribel in the spring, to perhaps one day build a larger house as their family grew. The idea of children was a constant undercurrent in their conversations, not an if but a when, both of them eager to fill their home with the laughter and love of the family they had both lost too soon. Spring arrived with its usual Montana drama: sudden thaws, muddy roads, and the occasional late snowstorm. But it also brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the garden was planted, and the land seemed to stretch and grow green after its long winter sleep. One evening in late April, as Maribel was preparing supper, she felt a wave of dizziness that forced her to grip the edge of the table for support. It was the third such episode in a week, and she could no longer ignore what it likely meant. When Cole came in from working with the new calves, he found her sitting at the kitchen table, a curious smile playing about her lips. "What is it?" he asked, washing his hands at the basin. "You look like you're keeping a secret." "Not for much longer," Maribel replied. "Come sit with me." Cole did as she asked, his expression curious but patient. Maribel took his hands in hers, gathering her courage for the momentous news she was about to share. "Cole," she said, her voice trembling with excitement, I believe I'm with child." For a moment, Cole simply stared at her, his blue eyes wide with shock. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise over the mountains, and he pulled her into his arms with a whoop of joy that brought Pepper running in from the porch to see what the commotion was about. "A baby," Cole said, pulling back to look at her with wonder. "Our baby." "When?" "I think sometime in November," Maribel said, laughing at his exuberance. "I'll need to see the doctor to be sure." Cole placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, his expression softening into something so tender it brought tears to Maribel's eyes. "A family," he whispered. "Our family." The months of Maribel's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparations and anticipation. Cole built a cradle with his own hands, carving intricate designs of wildflowers and horses into the headboard. Helen knitted tiny garments in soft wool, and even Tom and Jackson got into the spirit, presenting the expectant parents with a rocking horse they had fashioned during the quiet evening hours. As Maribel's body changed to accommodate the growing life within her, Cole's protectiveness increased tenfold. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town to help with the household chores, limited Maribel's work to light tasks only, and hovered anxiously whenever she so much as picked up a bucket of water. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Maribel told him one day, laughing as he rushed to take a basket of laundry from her arms. "Humor me," Cole replied, kissing her forehead. "I can't help worrying about you both." "We're fine," Maribel assured him, guiding his hand to her rounded belly where their child kicked vigorously, as if to confirm her words. "Strong as horses, both of us." In late October, a letter arrived that brought unexpected news. Fletcher, the cattle baron who had tried to steal their land, had died suddenly of a heart attack. His empire, built on fraud and intimidation, was crumbling as investigations revealed the extent of his wrongdoing. "It's strange," Cole said as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "I spent months fearing what that man might do to us, and in the end, it wasn't us he needed to fear but his own corrupt heart." Maribel, her hands resting on her now prominent belly, nodded thoughtfully. "There's a justice in that, I think. Not one I'd wish on anyone, but justice nonetheless." Cole wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against the autumn chill. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment. "With Fletcher gone, some of those smaller ranchers he forced out might be able to reclaim their land. They'll need help getting started again." "And you want to help them," Maribel said, not a question but a statement of understanding. Cole nodded. "The way Hollister helped me. The way we helped each other." Maribel turned to face him, cupping his cheek in her hand. "That's why I love you, Cole Armstrong. Your heart is as big as this Montana sky." Cole leaned in to kiss her, a gentle brush of lips that still, after months of marriage, sent a thrill through Maribel's body. "And you, Maribel Armstrong, are the reason that heart beats at all." Their son was born on a snowy November night, arriving after a labor that tested Maribel's strength to its limits. Cole paced outside the bedroom as Helen and the midwife attended to his wife, his prayers a constant murmur in the quiet house. When at last he heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife emerged a short while later, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Armstrong. A fine, strong boy, and your wife is asking for you." Cole entered the bedroom on unsteady legs to find Maribel propped up on pillows, her face pale but radiant, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up as he approached, her smile as brilliant as the day he had proposed. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Cole sat carefully on the edge of the bed and peered at the tiny face nestled in the blanket, red and wrinkled, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that, when they briefly opened, revealed the same blue as his own. "He's perfect," Cole whispered, overcome with emotion. "Just like his mother." "We need to name him," Maribel said, watching as Cole hesitantly reached out to touch the baby's cheek. Cole thought for a moment. "What about Thomas, after my grandfather? He was the one who taught me about horses, about respect for the land." "Thomas Armstrong," Maribel said, testing the name. "I like it. And for a middle name, what about James, after my father?" "Thomas James Armstrong," Cole repeated, nodding. "A good, strong name for a boy who will grow up free and proud on his own land." As if in approval, little Thomas squirmed and let out another cry, this one more insistent. "He knows what he wants," Cole said with a laugh. "Another trait he gets from his mother." Maribel swatted his arm playfully, then sobered. "I was thinking, while I was waiting for him to arrive, about how differently things might have turned out." "If you hadn't been at that auction, but I was," Cole interrupted gently. "And now we're here with our son in our home. The past doesn't matter anymore, Maribel. Only this, only now." Maribel looked down at their child, then back at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "You're right," she said. "This is what matters. This moment and all the ones to come." As the years passed, the Armstrong ranch flourished. Cole's plan to help other small ranchers succeed bore fruit, creating a community of independent cattlemen who stood together against larger interests that might have swallowed them individually. Maribel's garden expanded into a productive orchard that became known throughout the region for its apples and pears. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Emily Rose, whose arrival was considerably less dramatic than her brother's but no less joyful for her parents. On a warm summer day in 1888, 10 years after Maribel had stood on that auction block in Miles City, the Armstrong family hosted a gathering of friends and neighbors to celebrate the ranch's success. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, music played from a fiddle and harmonica, and children including Thomas and Emily ran laughing through the gathering, playing games of tag and hide and seek. Maribel, now 30 years old and more beautiful than ever in Cole's eyes, stood watching the celebration with a contented smile. Cole approached from behind, slipping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Completely," she replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "Look at what we've built, Cole, not just the ranch, but this." She gestured to the people gathered on their land, families that might never have existed without the support the Armstrongs had provided, children who would grow up knowing nothing of the hardships their parents had endured. "It's more than I ever dreamed," Cole admitted. "And it all started because I happened to be in Miles City on the right day." Maribel turned in his arms to face him. At 40, Cole was still as handsome as the day she had first seen him, though his dark hair now showed touches of silver at the temples. "It wasn't chance," she said firmly. "It was fate." Cole smiled down at her, the love in his eyes as strong as it had been on their wedding day. "I think you're right, Mrs. Armstrong. Some things are just meant to be." From across the yard, Thomas called for his father to come judge a roping contest he had organized with the other boys. Emily, not to be outdone, was showing a group of girls how to make flower crowns from the wildflowers that grew at the edge of the property. "Our children are calling," Maribel said with a laugh. "Duty awaits." Cole kissed her quickly but thoroughly. "Later," he promised in a low voice that still had the power to make her blush, "when everyone has gone home, we'll continue this conversation." Maribel's eyes sparkled with anticipation. I'll hold you to that, Cowboy." As they moved together to join the festivities, Maribel reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the darkest day of her life bound and humiliated on an auction block to this bright summer afternoon surrounded by love and abundance. The path had not always been easy, but every step had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Free, loved, and home at last.